Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Tether Talks. Today is an action-packed day at Tether. For those of you that are members of the app or soon to be via Android, we are having a digital event tonight, another We Fuck With Feelings event. It all happens through Zoom, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Do the math from there accordingly, because I don't know how myself. If you would like to join us tonight, please send us a DM or email us or DM us on Tether, and we'll get you that link, and we'd love to all hang out tonight and just sort of regroup as a community. Today we have a very special guest coming on. Dr. Ranj is going to be checking in with us from London. We know that some of our Tether members that live in London going back into lockdown as a result of the pandemic, and so we just wanted to hop on and have a conversation and spread some awareness. I got to bring it up now that there's two of us. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm glad that I'm so used to when I'm in California, the timing being impossible for London, but when I'm on the East Coast in the Tether hometown, it's easier to catch you guys. So thank you so much for joining us today and having this chat.
This is great timing for me, and you're in one of my spiritual homes, Toronto.
I didn't know there were spiritual homes. I'll have to ask more about that. What does that entail?
I think I left a part of myself there when I lived there for a very short space of time. When I was a medical student, I worked at Sick Kids, the hospital in Toronto.
My favorite place on earth.
We've spoken about this, I know.
Mm-hmm.
For a very short period of time, and I've not had a chance to come back since then, and that was probably 20 years ago.
Wow. Like trying to do the math. Like 20 years. Wow. As we've discussed before, we probably passed each other in the halls there as I went through my journey with my brother. And got such a part of my literal hometown, but also spiritually, specifically Sick Kids is just such a beautiful place where you obviously learn a lot of perspective and the courage that exists right from birth when it comes to children and what they're going through. We kind of hopped right in there. For those of our guests who have never met you, I'd love to hear how you kind of introduce yourself, and because you show up, we're similar in a sense, we show up in different ways in the world depending on what we're doing. Some people might know you as a Dancing with the Stars champ. Some people might think of you as the doc. So I'll let you tell us how you introduce yourself.
Okay, all right. I suppose I describe myself as somebody who wears many hats. My day job is I'm an emergency pediatrician. I work in London in the NHS at a place called the Evelina London Children's Hospital. I've been a doctor for 20 years. I grew up pretty much in London or just outside London, but I pretty much lived here for the last 20 years. Weirdly, along the way, don't ask me how this happened. It happened by accident. I ended up in television and ended up as a TV presenter as well. So I do that. And because of that, I've ended up on some quite interesting shows. You mentioned Dancing with the Stars. We call it Street. So I did that to which is the UK version of Dancing.
If only there was technology to pull it up right now.
I'm glad there's not. So I did that and various other bits and pieces. And I've also been really privileged and lucky to write some books. In fact, one's out tomorrow. This one is out tomorrow.
Yes. Which I definitely want to talk more about that.
And so I'm a doctor / TV presenter / author / I support a lot of charities as well. So I try to be in a position for as much good as I possibly can do, because I'm very lucky to be where I am. I'm very privileged to be where I am, and I'd rather use that platform for something useful and helpful, and do something positive with it. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. And I what, did I just lose sound?
No,
Oh, you're
I'm
just
just
so quiet when you're quiet. I was like, whoa, no background noise. No, we're obviously happy to have you on here and your perspective. I mean, everything you said might sound a little nuts everywhere else, but in LA, if you're a doctor and you're not on a TV show, are you a doctor? You know, that's the, I'm kidding. No, so of course I get that. So I know that you guys, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you guys and check in today is that London's back in lockdown. And so we wanted to spread a little love because I know our event tonight's a little bit late for our London members. So I want to spread a little love that way. I'd love to get an idea of kind of what that looks like in terms for you guys, because we hear these terms, but it's just different everywhere right now. I mean, I know personally between the States and Canada when I'm visiting, it's different. But what that looks like and what you're saying to guys out there who are kind of dreading going back into that.
Yeah, so we started our second lockdown about a week ago, actually, and it's supposed to be a 4-week fixed lockdown. The reason it came about was because as we're going into the winter, we tend to have a surge of illness
Mm,
anyway. The worry was we were seeing rising numbers of COVID cases as well, and there was a real concern that COVID, with everything else, including things like flu, which is really bad in the winter, it can't get over here, could have overwhelmed our healthcare system very quickly. And therefore, this concept of a short circuit breaker lockdown was brought in. And different parts of the UK have done it slightly differently. I live in
okay.
England, so our plan is to do a 4-week circuit breaker lockdown until I think roughly the 2nd of December, in the hope that it may just stem that flow enough for us to be able to get through it. And what it basically means is that um, the advice is to work from home if you can.
Mm,
So only go into work if you really have to. Obviously, if you're going into work, take all your COVID precautions and make it as safe as possible. Healthcare workers like myself have to go into work, so obviously we try to be as safe as we possibly can. Try not to use public transport if you can avoid it. Um, don't socialize with anybody outside your household,
okay.
um, or what we call a support bubble. So if you live by yourself, you can team up with another household and create a
Okay.
bubble.
So
Become
how
effective.
many people is that maximum?
Well, there isn't really a maximum in
Oh,
terms
okay.
of numbers, because you may have a family of 6 get
Right.
together with a person who lives by themselves and create 7. Um, but the idea is that lots of different people from lots of different households don't get together.
Gotcha.
We're allowed an hour of exercise a day to get outside. Um, and yeah, and obviously on top of that, we
So
have to
you
be,
stay inside other than the 1 hour.
you're
So
supposed
similar
to.
to Australia. Okay. Okay.
So you're allowed an hour of exercise to get outside, but it's freezing cold here. So actually,
Hmm.
I mean, it's been a week and I haven't done hardly anything because it's just an
Yeah,
incentive up there. And I'm one of these people who quite enjoys physical activity.
of course.
But hopefully it's just going to be until the 2nd of December, and then hopefully we can then come out of it. But obviously a lot of people, having been through one very long lockdown earlier this year, and are still dealing with the after effects of that and the impact that it had on everybody, um, mentally, financially, physically. um, People were still kind of putting the pieces back, and then this happened again. So I can totally understand that people are finding this tough.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously when the announcements come, we had a lot of guys kind of voicing the concern of like going back to this, like, finally feeling free. It does sound like hopefully, with it working, it's a manageable amount of time. I just, as pedestrian or as doctor, as you like, I just love to hear sort of what you suggest, under those confines. Obviously, it limits being able to be social and get out, as you said. What your kind of self-care tips are for guys that are looking for that right now?
So one thing I've definitely noticed in both lockdowns over here, just through sort of the feedback that I'm getting on things like social media, is a rise in anxiety.
Mm,
There's a rise in anxiety in terms of your life changing and having to do things differently, being stuck indoors, not being able to do what you normally would do. A rise in anxiety in terms of not knowing what's coming next, and I think that's
mm,
quite difficult for a lot of people. Um, the uncertainty of everything right now. And I totally understand that. And for some people, we have to acknowledge that home isn't the best place for them.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I would say to a lot of people that are experiencing that kind of emotion is that sometimes the reason it happens is because we are trying to control something we cannot control. And we have to acknowledge and accept that there are things outside of, that are just outside of our control, and stop trying to control them, because all that does is increase your stress levels. It increases your stress hormones. You get annoyed, you get agitated, you get anxious. One really good exercise actually is to, when you're feeling really, really on edge or worked up or anxious, generally speaking, make a list of the things that you can change and modulate and mitigate, and then make a list of things that you can't, and put the ones that you can and concentrate on the little changes you can make realistically that can make you feel better, and celebrate your little victories. Those are so important. So I say to people every day, when you get up, you make sure you have a routine. I don't care if you're not going to work. Get up, wash, get dressed, make your bed, have breakfast, because these tiny bits of routine are so helpful. You don't realize your brain finds them really useful because they are tiny victories, and it gives you a tiny little reward every time in your head. So that's really important. Structure and routine. Make sure you try to pay attention to, this is just the basics, is make sure you're putting things into your body that are helpful. So try, like, everyone just wants to eat crap and junk food. Let's be honest. I've been doing that. We're all in the same boat. But sometimes you've got to also remember to give your body what it needs as well. It's okay to enjoy food, and sometimes that is the only comfort we're getting in lockdown. That's all right. I don't mind. I don't begrudge people for doing that. But remember that you also need nutrition as well. So don't ever neglect that side of it. Enjoy your food, but just don't eat chips all day long. Other tips, I suppose, sleep, hugely important. One of the first things we'll scrimp on is sleep. Has a massive impact on our physical and our mental health. And that's one thing I would say to everybody. If you make one change in your life, make your sleep good as it can be. And then little things, maintaining connections with friends. We can't do it face to face necessarily, but we can do stuff like this, which I didn't do at all before lockdown. And actually now I quite enjoy doing it. Talk about your worries. Connect with people when you feel like you need to reach out to somebody. Try and keep on top of your difficult feelings and your unhelpful thoughts as best as you can. Give yourself time to relax. Give yourself a break. Don't try to do everything. And when you're in a place where you're thinking, gosh, I've run out, I just need to recharge, give yourself permission to do so. You're allowed to do that. If you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And it's so true. Self-care is hugely important right now, and don't feel guilty or bad about doing that. And if you can, if you're really lucky, find a new hobby. So if you, I mean, over in the UK, I don't know if you've heard it, over here, but everyone started baking banana bread and silly things like that. Like, got obsessed with banana bread. I just cleared out all my cupboards. I emptied out my wardrobes. I did all the little jobs that I've been meaning to do, and it gave me little victories. These little victories really, really count.
I love that. And if all else fails, grow a mustache, because it is, you just slowly watch it, hoping it will grow and no one will make fun of you by the end of November.
Is that what's going on there?
I think it's supposed to be. Yeah, it's, you know, it's in the culture of the community. I'm gonna slowly grow.
Right.
And, you know, and then I'm going to have this amazing mustache by November 30th and shave promptly on December 1st. But, you know what? I keep daring myself. I'm like, if it grows a little faster, I will do the Live Aid Freddie Mercury lip sync battle. Like, I'm ready. But it doesn't seem to be growing faster.
I saw on the app on Tether that you Googled how to make your mustache grow faster.
Yeah. So I have, you know, it's like you're talking about this. It's so interesting because on the app, at a time when I'm well traveled, you know, but at a time where I haven't been able to travel at all, I've made more friends worldwide than ever, which is like, it's just crazy to me that like all we're hearing about is how you can't go and travel and meet new people. And it's just like, you know, I've got a pod in Australia and a pod in like, you know, all over the place. And it's really cool. And it's like to get to have fun with that, like something like Movember, just kind of, you know, it's something that brings it together. And I'm a big fan of it anytime I try to brand something, because we want the least barrier possible when it comes to men's mental health. You know, I love anything that just signals like, you know, without saying much. And my mustache has been, you know, a point of humor for many men in our community over the last 11 days. And I have, yeah, you know, I'm grateful for the attention, but yeah, one of my, you never know what to call people who are like a little bit older than you, but like, they're not like a dad, but they're not like a friend, it's your friend. But mentor, friend, godfather kind of figure. We send a picture every day, and he's had a full mustache since day one, essentially. Like he didn't shave, slept, and it's grown. And it just like every day I have to, you know, take that. But it's something where we are technically celebrating men's mental health, but it really is just like fun. And, you know, if my lack of a mustache can make anyone feel less lonely right now, then, you know, I'm on board. So I wanted to ask you, because like, you know, everyone kind of has their approach to things. And what I love about sort of your approach to just, you know, with the books you're writing is that it starts so early. You know, with the book that you're releasing, you said tomorrow, right? Year one book. So yeah, I want to talk about that book first, because I'm just so interested in what inspired you sort of to approach, you know, at the earliest possible point to approach, you know, kids, and we'll get into the other one, but kids in general, what the message is in there and what kind of inspired that.
So yeah, so you're talking about this one that I keep bringing up. It's called A Superhero Like You. This book was inspired by the pandemic. It was inspired, it's a story actually of a little girl called Lily, who's just on the cover there, who wants to grow up to be a superhero, but doesn't want to grow up to be a superhero that wears a cape and a costume. She wants to be a real life superhero, like the people around her, like teachers, emergency services workers, hospital workers, recycling truck drivers, carers, all the people that kept the world going during the pandemic. All those frontline workers that put themselves in harm's way to keep everybody else safe and functioning. Those are the real life superheroes to her. And she talks about the kinds of skills that those heroes have, like the most fundamental one being kindness. Kindness being your superpower, and these superpowers being available to every child, no matter what. So in the book, we have loads and loads of diversity. I wanted to make sure that there were people that little children of every background and ability could relate to. So we have people of all colours, people of all, you can see different religions and different dresses, different types of clothes. But also we have a child with Down syndrome in there. We have people in wheelchairs. We have women in leading roles as opposed to women just being the supplementary role. So women being the main scientist in the lab, a woman driving the truck. And I wanted to any small child that was picking up the book to look at it and say, do you know what? I could be that person. I could be that superhero. And the reason I think it's so powerful is because when you're that age, when you're around the age of 3, 4, 5, 6, the world is a magical, undiscovered, unexplored place to you. And you have your entire life in front of you. Your world is full of possibilities. And all you need is nurturing and inspiring and love and support and, you know, and just nourishment to achieve those goals. Anybody can do that. Anybody, and that's the kind of feeling I want to feel. And I work with children, obviously at work as a pediatrician. I know just how important it is to nourish minds at that stage, because you have a lifetime of possibility in front of you. There's lots of evidence that if you look at the other flip side of it, adverse life events that happen at a young age there's loads of evidence that shows that it has a lifelong impact on you. and it affects your personality, the way you live your life, some of your choices, you know. And if we can try and reduce those as much as possible and make every child's start the best it can be, then the benefits in the long term will be massive. And this book is just one part of trying to make things better.
I love that. And I mean, working with kids every day, you must be, you know, I actually just got off a live where I was saying, like, you know, puppies and babies have been my university, because you just learn so much. And really, in essence, everything we're saying in the well-being community about getting back to a present state. When were you more present? You know, it's that what's actually happening in the moment, and sort of letting go of the past and not going too far in the future, right? So there's just so much to learn there. And I wonder, from your point of view, we have a lot of parents of varying ages, but I want to ask, and this is going to be for dads who are on the app, you know, moms, whoever's tuning in, like, what are your sort of guideposts for sort of building emotional intelligence, or, you know, just normalizing talk around mental health with children?
Yeah, honesty. The biggest one is honesty. Honesty and creating a safe space.
Okay.
So children don't necessarily expect you to have all the answers, but they want to feel like they can come to you to ask. And that's the factor. So there are very few things that children need to thrive. They need physical nourishment, and they need to feel safe. They need to feel secure. They need to feel like there is somebody that cares about them. They need to feel loved. And in a similar way, when it comes to talking about the difficult subjects, they just need to feel like there's somebody that they can turn to. That's a very protective factor. And I always say to parents, we never expect you to have all the answers. You're not the experts. But if you can be that conduit that sits with your child and says, right, tell me what's worrying you. Let's talk about why you're worried about it. And then maybe let's talk about how we can find things to help you together. And that, anybody can do that. Anybody can. Right. You don't need a lot of information. You just need to know that you can go here, you can go there. Leave the difficult part to people like me. But you can just be that cushion that or that platform that it all starts from. So create that warm, loving, welcoming, non-judgmental environment for your child to come to you. And you can't go wrong. You really can't. Nobody's taught how to parent. We have to remember that. Well, in fact, very few of us are taught how to parent. We learn through experience, through our own, how we were parented. And often not the best example, but we still can make good parents. And that's because actually there's very little that you need to do perfectly as a parent. Just know the basics.
Yeah. You know, and so much of that, like, I just want to steal everything you just said and give it as the explanation of Tether, because it's exactly what we've set out to do, is create that non-judgmental safe space where it's not expected to have all the answers to fix each other, that there's an equal balance between being supported and being supportive, you know, and it's, you know, we don't want our peers to fix us and give us the answers. We want to be heard and empathetically listened to. And it's kind of a beautiful, you know, connection to hear that's what we wanted from the beginning, and that, you know, it's never too late to create that space, you know, and that's our most inherent divine right, to want that safety, to be heard and you know, loved no matter what we share and what we're going through. And yeah, I mean, that hit me. It's just like, that's really awesome. And I hope that does translate into, you know, the fathers that we have on the platform and the value they see in being heard and just being there for one another without, you know, my dad was definitely a fixer. And I mean, my dad loved us too much, I say, you know, like, you know, and he showed it in every way he can, but he didn't want us to have any problems. It was just like trying to fix everything, you know. And as an adult, you know, and unfortunately my dad has passed from suicide, and I don't get to kind of say, like, you know, I get it now. Hey, thank you so much for trying to shield, you know, me from everything, but what a job, and how exhausting. And it would have been okay to just say, okay, yeah, let's deal with that. You know, that's going to be uncomfortable for a little while, you know. And I know that, like, you know, in some way he through what I do with Tether, he knows that I know, but it is something that I wish I got to say to him. It's just like, wow, you were doing a lot, you know,
Yeah.
you were just doing a lot. And I guess at a certain point you could have just, you know, been there with me in the moment, you know,
Yeah.
just, and I love
That's
that. And I love that you say that.
think is best. And your dad, your dad would be proud of what you're doing now. Your dad would be amazed and and impressed, I bet, with everything that you have done and everything that you've created. So yeah. Well,
Except for my mustache.
adult, oh, yeah, except for your that you can have a bit.
Exactly. No, I love that. So, and then your next book that's coming out kind
Yeah,
of continues on this path, and I can't wait. I'm gonna probably hit you up for like an early version because I'm just so interested in the topic in general. But obviously, you know, we are giving men, once they turn 18, the opportunity to show up on the app and connect with each other and support each other. And for some people, it's kind of righting wrongs and finding what they never had, and you know, dealing in their truth. For other people like me, it's just I've spent a lot of time investing in mental health and well-being, and I want a community around that. You know, you can only spend so much time one-on-one with a practitioner, or, you know, in COVID, we can't go to our men's groups and stuff. So, but you know, this idea of starting with reading the book that you've written when they're starting to read, and then the book that you're writing that gets released in February, or that's been written. I'd love to hear more about that, whatever you can say at this stage.
yeah. So that one's, yeah. So I was very lucky to be approached by the same publisher to write another book for. Essentially, they wanted a growing up guide, a modern, up-to-date growing up guide for boys, because there seems to be a lot of stuff out there for girls, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of supportive literature, particularly girls entering their teens and during that tricky period that we all go through. But there wasn't a great deal out there for boys, and the stuff that was out there was relatively out of date.
Mm-hmm.
So we set about this task of writing a modern growing up guide for boys, which I've called How to Grow Up and Be Amazing. And it's a guide for every single male identifying person, young person, a guide to how to be their best selves. That's all it is. How to live your best life, how to be the best version of yourself. And it's not trying
Love
to,
that.
it's trying to get you to recognize who you are and celebrate it and work with it and make the most of it. So we cover everything from the biology of growing up, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
puberty, hormones, and everything that happens there, through to identity, sexuality, mental health, social media, living your best life on a day-to-day basis, so looking after your body and your sleep and your, you know, getting into exercise in a way that you may enjoy, and hopefully just giving boys that sort of reassuring voice that so many of them don't seem to have when they're in
Absolutely.
that that sort of knowledgeable kind of reassuring voice that is quite comforting, that says, don't worry, you're doing okay, you're all right, actually it's not so bad. I know it can be crappy at times, but it won't be like this forever. It does get better.
I
It's
love
so
that. I want that voice right now.
well, you're surrounded by a community of those voices,
I
which is
am. Yeah, you're right.
the beauty of Tether. Um, it was so strange when it got announced on Monday that it was happening. I didn't expect it, but so many parents and carers came forward and said, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking for this for so long," and I just assumed people must have just been using lots of different resources. Turns out that lots of people, even friends of mine, a friend of mine messaged me last night, and she was on Dancing with the Stars with me. She's a huge
Mm-hmm.
pop. She's got a son who's 12, and she said, "Oh my God, I need your book. I need your."
I need it now.
And I was like, "Wait."
No, I mean, even like and I think the guys in our community, like I want to read it just to like almost retrospectively,
Yeah,
because like in some ways, and even like you said, like when that voice, if you don't have it, like even if it's being offered, sometimes it's not the voice you want to hear it from. Like, I know, for instance, like when my mom tried to talk to me about my body, like I was like, get away from me. And the way it was done in health class was also like awkward. And if you didn't laugh, like it was weird, and you know, like all this stuff. So it's interesting because in so much defense at that time, when so much is changing, you're not really, you know, hearing of what's really happening. And like, I'm even curious to ask, like, when, you know, in writing this book, like, when do the hormones settle? Like, you know, like, when do we do they? I don't know. That's a test every day, I guess.
They definitely get better into your 20s, which is good.
Okay.
But
Yeah, I
during
don't think people realize that it's that long, you know,
well,
and that goes into our usership.
well, your personality doesn't really, we think, settle until your 20s, possibly even early 30s.
Wow.
And there's a really interesting part in the book where I talk about how the brain changes as you grow. So the teenage, really interesting thing. Your brain is never like that at any other stage of life, which is why teenagers behave like an almost entirely different species sometimes. And I'm sure parents can relate to this, and we can relate to it because we were teenagers, we felt like nobody understood anything that we were going through. You know, parents are from a different planet, and nobody understood what you felt or, you know, could possibly relate. It's because of the way your brain develops. It develops from the back and it develops forwards. So what happens as you grow from a child to an adult, your brain expands in size first, and then it tidies itself up. And it tidies itself up from the back forwards. So it tidies the primitive bits up first, and then the bit that's responsible for the most complex thought is tidied up last. So what you do is, as you grow, you rely on your primitive bits first to make your decision. And that's why you, as a teenager, you feel like your emotions are controlling your life. It's because the emotional part of your brain, ironically, is one of the most primitive parts of our brains.
Wow.
So the bit that deals with emotion actually develops it develops quite late on. So to control our ability to control our emotions develops quite late.
Right.
So what we do then is we're at the mercy of everything else, and our forebrain up here, which usually tells us to calm down when we're feeling X, Y, and Z, whatever strong emotion it might be, temper it down, can't do it. So you're at the mercy of your biology.
Wow.
And we go into explaining why, as a teenager, you feel a certain way, and it's not your fault. It's really not your fault. It's your brain trying to work itself out.
That's amazing. And you know, I just want to bring to light like this idea of, you know, what a time for everybody to be surrounding a young man as they grow up, because, you know, you have to be so careful there with any sort of shame and any sort in the way that they're learning, because if you're saying that it's literally not developed, you know, that's such a dangerous period for anything that like echoes a cancel culture or shaming, you know, in that way. Like we really have to look at those years like laboratory years of learning and growing and championing failure, you know, within reason, consciously and legally, yes, of course. But I think there's a huge divide right now between, you know, old guys who have made decisions and the cancel culture that goes through that, and sort of that bleeding down into your learning years. And I think based on what you're saying, it's quite clear that we need to approach men into their 20s from that learning curve and from that compassion and from that understanding. I'm not saying let anybody off, you know, easy, but like we said with a parent, you know, it's about coming and sitting with them and learning together. And, you know, if you're defined by your worst move and you're telling me my brain's not developed fully when I made my first move, what does that do? You know, I can see the direct correlation between that and what we know is the men's mental health suicide rates and epidemic. Like that's just so scary that you're sort of being defined before you're literally defined.
Yeah.
God, the way you said it so clear.
Yeah, one of the big things we talk about that you've just brought up is the issue around men's mental health. And one of the theory is that part of the reason we have, sadly, such a high rate of suicide amongst young men, for example, is because we are conditioned to not be able to speak on our feelings. We are conditioned to not feel our feelings and not be vulnerable and not be, not be in need and not ask for help. And I wanted to unpack all of that in this book and say, that's not the way to do it. It's okay. It's okay to cry if you want to cry, whenever you need it. Unpack all of that nonsense that we've been taught, because, boys aren't invincible. And if it's okay for girls to do certain things, it's absolutely okay for boys to do those, and vice versa.
Right.
Well,
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. That's awesome. And I'm so glad that's finally being explored along with the physical journey. Because if anything, like also too, in the information I always got, it was more on the physical changes and, the body, and obviously not building in a body-mind connection at such a formative point can be very detrimental. And yeah, as we talk about this, I can see how it leaves men on the other end in their early 20s attributing to those suicide rates, of course. I hope that, hand in hand, you're catching them when they're young and formative. And then if they've somehow missed those two books or you didn't write them early enough, like, I hope that they can come to us and kind of, join. And I think, part of the practice of us too is just, come share on Tether on good days too, get in the practice of sharing and connecting on the app, so that it doesn't become this sort of mental health and your mental well-being, this sort of negative driven experience of when something's going wrong. I check in as part of my overall regulation. And I think that's something that I definitely didn't learn, as you're saying, like as a teenager. It's like when there's an issue, there's a tension. And I think that if there was the normalcy to checking in throughout, and literally checking into how it feels in the body and your emotional intelligence during those points, that's definitely something that's really like kind of hitting me right now as you talk about that there's so much attention on negative behavior, but there isn't a lot of schooling on honoring what is and honoring the journey that you're on and that whole side of it. So I'm excited to write this book. Write it, read it. Oh, I'm gonna write it. And now you better hurry, because I'm gonna write it. I'm very excited, and I will be happy to share that. I know there's, like I said, so much interest on just the guys themselves, and then obviously anyone who's entering fatherhood in the process of fatherhood, just kind of getting to learn that's amazing. And it's amazing that you have found time to do that on top of everything else. So, but well, I'm not going to feel bad, because I know better, to compare for my mental health. But you're doing a lot, man, and it's making a very big difference. And I just, I look up to you and I appreciate that. I really do.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. And I think what you've created with Tether is a really special place. And I'm really grateful that there are apps like that out there, and I love it. I love the fact you brought up the people talk about the positives and not just feeling down or negative or frustrated or whatever it is. You peppered throughout the feed are, somebody said it's time to smile, and that actually genuinely made me smile. I was like, brilliant, well done.
Yeah,
so nice that you give the light and the shade. And I think the space that you've created is such a simple model, but it's so effective and it's so needed. And thank you for doing that. I think that's a brilliant idea, and I think everyone should check it out, especially boys.
Especially, we will get them. Well, I won't take up too much of your time, because I know there's a lot going on, but I really do appreciate this time together. And what's next? I mean, I know that we've got. Are you dancing with any stars this week, or what can we do to support the overall?
So interestingly, we started a secret, it wasn't a not so secret dance club. So myself, Michelle Visage, Judge Rinder, who's a big TV star over here, Alex Scott and Emma Barton, we were all on this show at different stages.
Okay.
We all became friends through the show, even though we were on different series. And we've started like a secret Strictly dance club where we go for a class, a dance class, once a week with a private tutor, and it's so much fun. And it kind of brings that joy back. But obviously, we can't do that. So, so we'll see where we go with that once we come back out of lockdown. Other than that, I think it's just a case of getting through this lockdown, knuckling down. I've got lots of work to get done, as always. And then we've got Christmas to look forward to, hopefully. So let's see how we go for that. Have you got any plans for Christmas? What are you going to do?
I mean, we're kind of in the same boat where we're going to see what makes the most sense, right? And what's the safest this year. I think that's kind of the key. And yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to celebrate wherever I am. And I don't have a long list of wants right now. I'm you know, I'm just, I'm good. So I'm just going to kind of take it as it goes. And, you know, I don't know. I could, maybe it's time one without snow. Maybe I'll just stay in LA and, you know, stay safe. But yeah, listen, let us know, please, anything that's going on in London that we can, you know, support, that's helping guys connect more. And, you know, you're in a way a feet on the ground there for me, and I really appreciate that. And if anything kind of comes up, you know, we're there. And of course, for any guy who's listening that is looking to connect in a more meaningful way, regardless of lockdowns, restrictions, any of that, Tether is downloadable on the Apple Store and soon to be available for Android.
Thank you, and thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that's been watching and commenting. And my friends,
crazy audience,
and like they've all been messaging along, and I'm so glad that people found this useful. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go grow my mustache, but I will talk to you later.
I will see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.